Gonna check and see. And and here we are. Okay. Uh I just realized I took my face off of here too. Okay. Hey everybody. This is Hunting We Will Go. Adventures in Endpoint Threat Detection. And our speaker is David Branscome. I will be as in previous sessions, monitoring the track one chat for questions. So, with that, I'll turn it over to you, David, and you can get started.
All right, thanks, Brian. So, hi, everybody. My name is Dave Branscome. I am a cloud security architect at Microsoft. So, I support Microsoft partners and customers in delivering security solutions specifically related to Microsoft 365 and a little bit of Azure in there too. So you'll see that the majority of what I'm talking about here today is going to be slanted towards how Microsoft does things. But I think that's pretty interesting way of doing some threat detection that we've got built into our tools. So hopefully you'll find this entertaining. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about the challenge that we've got as actually let me fix something here real quick. Give me 1 second. I want to just turn off my video so that there we go. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is what is the problem that we're trying to solve here as defenders, as people that are trying to protect our network. The problem is basically this. Defenders think in lists, attackers think in graphs. And as long as that's true, the attackers win. So this was a statement made in a blog a couple years ago. And basically the point that's being made here is, oh, sorry about that. I hit the, there we go. The point that's being made is that a lot of network defense goes wrong before there's actually any attack, any contact with an adversary, starting with how defenders think of the battlefield. So most defenders go into the battle, you might say, thinking of how to protect their assets. So they'll list out their assets, they'll prioritize them, maybe sort them by workload, business function, whatever it is. And so defenders basically have this list of assets, which might include system management services, maybe an asset inventory database, a BCDR spreadsheet, whatever it is. That's how they approach their thinking when it comes to lining up how they defend their assets. But there's one significant problem with that. Attackers breach a network by landing somewhere in the graph of all your assets. And that technique that they use could be something as simple as a phishing email, right? So they don't care where they land. Once they aren't following your list of defenses sequentially. So they don't know what the defenses are that you've got lined up. And then they have to figure out a way to get through this firewall and then this intrusion detection system and then this whatever. They just land wherever they land, and they go where the graph allows them to move. And so as defenders, for years, we have built attackers will launch attacks in the order that we have prioritized our defenses. But in reality, that isn't how it works at all. Attackers don't care where their entry to the network is. They only care that they get in and get to the assets that they're interested in. So they can move where they need to go once they're inside. They're not looking at your defenses in this way. They look at them as kind of obstacles to get to a goal. Scenario is kind of work through how an attacker would get from the point of a malicious email with some links and attachments in it, all the way to full compromise of a domain. And there, the process is going to follow what you might typically see in an organization. A user opens a mail, They click on a link in the email. Maybe there's a document that's got some weaponized malware. Mimikatz runs and compromises that machine. They compromise the user account. They move laterally to a more privileged account after enumerating the accounts in the domain. They move from there to a domain admin or global system admin, and then they've got full control over the domain. That's really how it happens in most organizations. That's probably the easiest path that we see. So let's see how this happens. And I did pick that picture out of the Creative Commons, so I shouldn't get sued for that. But we're going to approach this again. A Microsoft tooling centric perspective. These are the tools that are available in Microsoft products because number one, that's what I'm familiar with. But also, I think what it does is it shows the ability to have a full view of the battlefield. You get a full perspective on what's happening, not just the mailbox, not just the endpoint, but you get the entire scenario pulled together at once. So let's go here. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got a couple portals open here in our tabs. We've got the Office 365 Security and Compliance portal that's open. We see some emails that have come in, and some of these emails have contained malware that was removed after delivery. So these are very common kinds of alerts in large organizations, and occasionally you'll get email that contains malware that slips through the cracks, right? Let's go over to the Defender ATP. So this is for the endpoints. Here we see that there has been a possible credential theft from the NTDS DIT. So the NTDS DIT, as most of you are fully aware, is the NT Directory Services database. This is the heart of Active Directory. It stores all of your Active Directory information, including password hashes. And so if an attacker is able to acquire this file, then they're able to gather information about the users in the domain. They're able to steal credentials. And then with that credential information, they're able to escalate their permissions in order to reach whatever assets they're after. If I go up here to the Cloud App Security, this is our Cloud Access Security Broker. And so what we're looking at here is a suspected overpass the hash attack. So overpass the hash attack, a lateral movement technique where an attacker steals an NTLM hash and creates a forged Kerberos ticket from it in order to gain the permissions of a more privileged user. So we can see in this case that Janet's credentials were stolen and used to authenticate to Annette's PC. And then lastly, we'll go to the Incident Alerts tab. And so here, this is where all the alerts are kind of correlated together. So what looked like initially 3 individual, independent attacks have all actually been correlated into a single incident, as we see here. So here in the Alerts tab, if you're on the SecOps team, you get a detailed chronological timeline of all the alerts involved in this particular, connect the dots about what was happening. And we're not going to click through every single one of these, but we're going to do the ones that appear to be interesting. So for example, we've got this message that we saw previously after delivery. We scroll down a little bit. We see also the possible credential theft from the NTDS DIT. So we saw that in one of the other tabs, the one for Defender ATP. So it's bringing all these alerts together into a single incident and correlating them together and seeing what happened. Now, if we scroll over here a little bit, you can see that it's bringing these things in from different sources. So some of them came from the endpoints using Defender ATP, or what we have renamed to Defender for Endpoint. Um, and then cloud app security, our CASB solution. So we've got these different service sources. There are also alerts that might come from identity solutions like Azure AD and things like that. So this gives us a starting point for investigating this incident. So let's go ahead and close these other extraneous tabs. Now we're left with just the incident alerts. So if we go to the summary page of the incident itself, this is where your SecOps team is going to get a full view of the incident as a whole, right? So this is going to help us to make some informed triage decisions. And it's also going to track progress on remediating the threat and restoring the assets to a healthy and secure state. So the first thing that we see here is we have a scope, right? So we know that there were 5 devices that were impacted by this incident, 3 users that were impacted, and a single mailbox that was impacted in this incident. We also see under this alerts and categories, we see the MITRE attack tactics. So if you look at your MITRE attack framework, you see that there are, I don't remember the exact number, it's like 12 or something like that, different phases of the attack cycle. And those are listed here. And if you look at those MITRE attack TTPs, the ones that are highlighted here exploited as part of this overall incident. We also have a timeline that shows what took place from oldest going all the way down to the most recent. And we have the impacted entities. So what are the devices? What are the users? What is the mailbox that was impacted? And what is the severity? So you can tag each of these entities so that, for example, if you've got an incident ID, you can bring them all together with a single tag, for example. Let's scroll down a little bit here. And again, we get more information on the incident timeline of how the attack has progressed through the environment and reached a certain level. So at the bottom here, we have this view alerts. So this will go back to the alert tab and allow us to start investigating the incident. So we're on the alerts tab. And here we can identify that the malware was delivered through Outlook. So this was based on a file hash that was shared by Office 365. So we see that there was a malicious file detected based on an indication provided by Office 365. And if we get some more detailed information about this. So we get a full description of what the status is of this particular alert. Was it resolved? Was it a true alert? Was it a false positive? What happens here is that as these alerts are triggered, there are security playbooks that are built into Office 365 that go into effect. And these security playbooks are essentially back-end policies that automate the actions of Microsoft 365 Defender tool sets. So a security playbook is launched automatically when there are specific alerts triggered within your organization. And once that alert triggers, then the playbook is run by the automated investigation and response system. Looks at all the associated metadata of the alert, including things like email messages, the users, the devices, and so on. And then it provides a recommendation for actions that your organization can take to control and mitigate that threat. Let's go over to investigations real quick. Now, within the investigations tab, what we see are all the investigations that were associated with this incident. So again, this allows us to quickly review those investigations, what alerts triggered them, what the status of them is, if there were threats found, if the automated remediation failed or if it was successful. And so we can take a closer look at the investigation graph for this one for a malicious file was detected based on this indication in Microsoft 365. So what this shows us here is that following a signal from Defender for Office 365, there was an issue with a file that was received in Outlook. Defender went in and performed an investigation. Okay, it analyzed all the files that were on Barbara's PC. It ran through all these files, processes, services, drivers, IP addresses, different persistence methods. It looks for all these different types of things. It found a file that was malicious and it remediated that issue. Okay, so Barbara's machine in the Defender portal was set for what we call fully automated remediation. In other words, it automatically fixes any issues that it's able to fix without asking for confirmation that this is what should be done. Now, if we go to the Devices tab, we get some more information about the machine. So let's look at Barbara's machine. And on this little pop out, we see some specifics about her machine in particular. We see what domain she's a part of, what operating system is running, what the current health state of the machine is. We also see data sensitivity. So where is this information coming from? Well, there's a couple ways that this can be triggered. Number one, we can tag it as such. We can tag this machine as being one that contains highly confidential information, but we can also derive this information from data that is Azure information protected that is identified on the machine. So Defender can look and see, is there information that is tagged or categorized by Azure information? Then we know that this machine contains highly confidential information. Let's scroll down just a little bit. We also have some information here about active alerts that are logged onto this machine. We see Barbara Moreland and Eric Doubles. So these are the people that we're going to start investigating and try to figure out, what happened on these machines and why are these users particularly being targeted. So let's go back to the root of the incident. So this is where we were before. If we click on the Alerts tab, and we go to the email message containing malware after delivery alert. So here we get an overview. Okay, and again, it's telling us that there was malware that was delivered and later removed. Let's find out a little bit more about that. Now, the second line down here says mail with malware is zapped. Okay, so if I click on this, it pops out this incident page related to this alert related to malware being zapped. So what ZAP is, it's an acronym. So ZAP stands for Zero Hour Auto Purge. What this is doing is if you get an email that actually contains malware and it slips through the cracks of your message hygiene system, and then later on we identify through some other mechanism that there is malware associated with that email, we can go back in and using the 0 hour auto purge, delete the messages that contain that malware in your organization. And we'll also delete any other, delete that malware from any other organizations around the world, right? So that's what 0 hour auto purge is doing. Now you notice there's an ID associated with this. So if we click on this ID, it opens this alert tab. And let's go to the alert itself. So there's a lot of these really cool graphs that you can look at and kind of make visual associations between the different tools or the different phases of the incident. So here we see that it says that by the time this alert was triggered, this user received malware and malicious mail matching the conditions of your alert policy. And this is Barbara. So Barbara is the one that received this malware. So we know that that's one of the people that we have to look at. Let's close this. Let's go to the email tab. And so here we get a lot of information here about how the email was identified, and we also get some information about the entity type. If we look at the entity value, we see email received by user Barbara Morrill at MTP Demos, blah, blah, blah. So let's click on that. All right, so what this is showing us is who the sender was, right? It was this mppdemos@juno.com, who the sender proposed to be or pretended to be, and who. Okay, so let's close this. Now, we're back at the original page. What this is showing us is that we identified this mail with malware that was zapped based on a bunch of different indicators. So for example, if we look in the emails containing column, we see that it had an attachment with a certain file hash. We see that it was in a cluster of emails that came from the sender domain of juno.com. It had a certain subject line. It came from a certain sender IP address, and so on. We see what the disposition of the email was, whether it went to junk, whether it was blocked, or some things that we need to look at with regard to this email. Did it go to other people, for example? So let's close this for now. So let's look at the alerts tab. And if we scroll down a little bit. Okay, one of the things that we can also identify here is that the attacker enumerated the users and IP addresses that were connected to a domain controller using the SMB protocol. Okay, so let's open this up. All right, so again, we get some good information here about the status of the alert, whether it was resolved, what are the machines that were involved here. If I click on open the alert page, it takes us over to Cloud App Security. And what this tells me is that this user and IP address reconnaissance took place from Barbara Moreland's PC. It was connected to the MTP Air DC01. And then I get some information here about what SMB session enumeration took place. So here's where I see that Barb Moreland, that her session with the domain controller was exposed. I go to the users tab. And here's where I see Barb Moreland. Now let's open up her account and see what might be interesting about her. So here we quickly get some information about her user ID. We get some information that tells us that she's in the finance department, but let's open up her user page. Let's see what we can find out about her specifically. So under the user threat section here, we see that Barb has an investigation priority of 272, which is a high risk level in Azure Active Directory. We also see how many alerts she is associated to, or her account is associated to, I should say. In the user exposure session or section here, what I see is how many devices may be associated with Barb, how many logon types, locations, resources, all these things that can give us an indication of where her account could also have been compromised or what machines might be at risk here. Let's scroll down just a tad. Oh, okay. So I got a lot of information down here about her contact information, some basic contact information. If I scroll up, if we dig deeper, we have some information here. Like I said, the priority score. Her particular score over the last 2 weeks shows that she's in the top 90% of your organization as far as risk levels. So something's definitely happening with Barb that we need to take a look at. So let's go ahead and close this for now. And what we want to do now is go hunt. So what we've done is we've investigated Barb Moreland. And what this has done now is we've opened up this advanced hunting tab. So it's under this, this hunting menu item here. If you expand this, it shows an advanced hunting tab. What this allows us to do is one of two things. You can either start an investigation from an ongoing investigation, or you can create a hypothesis-driven investigation. The tool here is using Kusto query language. So this is a language that you can tell it's relatively similar to SQL. But the idea here is that it allows you to quickly do hunting over thousands of records in a very short amount of time. This is the same language that is used in Azure Log Analytics and in Azure Sentinel and in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So using this type of query, the SecOps team can hunt over the telemetry data that's been collected from all the different PCs in the organization, as well as different like email transactions and devices. And we can even get information from Cloud App Security. So what we're going to do is remove a little bit of the text here. And what we're doing is identifying different events that are related to Barb Moreland that have taken place within like the last 48 hours. So when we run the query, we get some information about Barb. We also see the connection that's made probably trying to identify what groups Eric is a member of. So we know that he's a help desk supervisor. So he's probably a local admin on a bunch of machines. He was probably also able to do queries against different groups. So now we've queried the domain admin groups using Eric Gubble's account, and possibly we're able to identify who the domain admins are and use their credentials to escalate our privileges and then steal that NTDS DIT. So I'm out of time, but I think you probably can tell that there's a lot of capabilities here in this advanced hunting tool set. There are a lot of, this is the schema for the tool itself. There are also on GitHub, dozens and dozens of pre-built queries that people have made for doing hunting using this Kusto query language. You might have to make some minor adjustments for what tenants you're looking at and things like that. But it's a pretty cool tool. And if you're using Office 365 or Microsoft 365 in your environment, I encourage you to take a look at some of these things. And happy hunting, everybody. And that's it for me. Can't hear you, Brian. I think you're on mute. No, I'm here. Yep. Okay. You bet.